Hello and welcome back to the Pension Confident Podcast. My name's Philippa Lamb, and this month, inspired by International Women's Day, we're focusing on a challenge many of us face at work, bridging that gap between our performance and our pay. Research tells us that for years now, more women than men have been going to university. Women are actually more likely to complete their studies and gain a first-class degree. So you would think that would translate into better career prospects and pay, right? Well, in fact, the same government study shows that just 1 year after graduation, men are more likely to be in highly skilled employment, with average earnings 9% higher than their female peers. 10 years later, and that earnings gap balloons to a staggering 31%. So why is this happening? Joining me today, we have 3 experts to help us navigate this inequality maze and give us the inside track on how to be bold about asking for and getting more.
I believe it is harder to navigate the world as a woman, and that can, over time, have an impact on your self-confidence.
What are your 3-month goals? What are your 6-month goals? What are your 12-month goals? It's about showing the value you've brought.
You have to deal with people. You need to know how to communicate. You're dealing with money. You understand the value and the price of things.
Natalie Campbell MBE is an award-winning social entrepreneur and broadcaster. She's also Chancellor of the University of Westminster and an independent candidate in the 2024 Mayor of London elections. Hello, Natalie.
Hi.
Thanks for sparing the time to be with us.
Thanks for having me.
Lynn Anderson-Clark is CEO and co-founder of The Know, an independent media company on a mission to help everyone start their day feeling informed and hopeful. Hi, Lynn.
Hello.
Nice mission, Nat.
Thank
I like
you.
the hopeful. And from PensionBee, here's Senior Customer Experience Researcher Priyal Kanabar. Lovely to have you with us again, Priyal.
Hi.
The usual disclaimer before we start. Please remember that anything discussed on this podcast should not be regarded as financial advice or legal advice. And when investing, your capital is at risk. I think I would like to open up this discussion by asking all of you about your own experience on pay. Lynn, I know you've been looking into this. You had some great responses when you asked your followers about it.
Yes. So we did a survey yesterday in our newsletter, kind of in preparation for this. I wanted to see kind of what other people's experiences were. I had my own experience, but I wanted to kind of open that up. And so we asked the same question. What we found, 47% of our readers said yes, that they had been paid less.
So they actually knew they'd been paid
And
less.
knew. 33% said they suspected, but they didn't, they didn't have any proof, you know what I mean? And 20% said no. So I thought that was a pretty staggering
Yeah, it is.
stat. And we actually, you had an opportunity to kind of tell a story in there if you wanted to of kind of your experience. A couple of the responses, I was his line manager, but we were both employed at the same time. I only found out when I was given payroll to sign off for the first time.
Wow.
So her report was earning more than her.
Correct. I only found out because it was my husband. And the gap wasn't small. It was around 20K. When I brought it up during my appraisal, I was told it was unfortunate that I discovered this. I replied that it was unfortunate that there wasn't more transparency. I'm a business owner, and I understand why, there are reasons people get paid different amounts, but that cannot account for the numbers that we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so transparency is key in a workplace.
Have you personally experienced it?
I have. So my first few jobs were finance in New York. And part of that is looking after budgets. And I'm a bit nosy. And so part of that is looking after salaries. I mean, that was part of my job. I had to know these numbers.
Okay.
And you better believe I figured out how much people were making in certain jobs. And I was being paid less than a male colleague who was actually my best friend, who is still one of my best friends.
What did you do? Or did you not?
I didn't. And I want to say that I'm really proud of the progress we have made as a society. But this was, 2000, and not to date myself, but 2007, 2008. And we have gotten so much further in the conversations we can have in a workplace. And I want to recognize that. We have a lot of work to still do. Me, who is up here as a female entrepreneur, did not have that power back
Absolutely
then.
not. So if we're thinking about undergraduates job hunting for that first job, it's a daunting thing, exciting thing, but it's daunting. You've got no experience, obviously. What would you suggest they should be thinking about then to max out their chances of doing well?
So firstly, don't apply for jobs that don't advertise the salary. And I think we really need to take ownership on this. The more people that don't apply for jobs where the salary is not visible, the more impetus there is on employers to put the salaries on the job description.
It's really common, isn't it? Not to
It's
see
so
salaries.
common. Competitive salary and all of this opaque stuff.
Meaningless.
Yeah. If you know what the salary is, or at least the benchmark of the salary, it means you can have a conversation. When you walk in and they say, "What's your salary expectation?" That is the biggest bear trap. And
Yeah.
it's such a horrid question. If the salary is there, and at Baloo, the salary that is advertised is the salary you will get. It's not a negotiable salary. This is the salary. This is the value we perceive for this role.
Okay.
That's it. Lots of organisations are getting better if it's not a fixed salary of sharing salary bands. So understanding where you are on the salary band
helpful.
is really important. But I would also talk to friends. So if you are brand new to the world of work, ask your friends what they're seeing from the roles that they are applying for, and understand, what do you think the benchmark is? Ask your lecturers, ask people, so you have the tools to think about what salary makes sense for the job that you're doing.
That is really helpful. Hi, it's me, Philippa, just interrupting briefly to remind you to click on that subscribe button so you never miss an episode of the Pension Confident podcast. Remember to share, rate and review too, and now I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of this month's conversation. Happy listening. Thinking about all the things that young people are told they need to do, that they need to do internships, they need to do extracurricular stuff to massage their chances of doing well.
Yeah.
And what is your sense, all of you, of how much value that actually brings? Because everyone does it, don't they? So there is a bit of a question in my mind about how much value it adds. Tell me.
So I don't think everyone does do it. I'm old. So I come from a time where I started working before I was even legally allowed to work. I was interning for free. Bus fare, I think, was 20p. And I had a Saturday job. The Saturday job is dying.
I had a Saturday job.
A Saturday job just gives you the confidence of knowing how to deal with the workplace. Being a retail girl is a game changer.
Were you in a shop? Yeah, I was in a shop too. You have to deal with people.
You have to deal with people. You need to know how to communicate. You're dealing with money. You understand the value and the price of things. So that great grounding, I would say, if you don't have a Saturday job, just get a Saturday
Get
job.
one. Yeah.
Get one. Then on to the internships. Internships are really important if you want to understand the nuances of an industry that you're entering. And when you're there, don't go in like the intern. Go in and be like, right, I'm here, I'm working, I am doing the same job as X person, and add that value while you are there. If you go in as the intern and wait to be fed, you won't get the best experience.
I mean, this draws on confidence, doesn't it? And not everyone has that confidence. So I'm wondering about tools for that, like mentors. Did any of you have early stage mentors? I did not.
I actually currently mentor someone. She's a recent grad, and I really look forward to our monthly catch-ups. I find that I'm able to share my experience, the things that I wish I knew when I was just starting out that took years of trial and error to learn. But I also really enjoy learning from her. She has fresh ideas. I'm now seeing those monthly catch-ups as more for kind of an exchange rather than a one-way mentorship.
And do you talk about money? Does she ask
We
about
do,
money?
yeah, we do talk about money.
Okay.
Yeah, we talk about benchmarking. A tool that I recommended to her that I would recommend to everyone is on the Otter website. It's Otter Salary Benchmarking. What I like about it is it shows the long-term salary growth of various roles.
Other experiences of mentoring. Did you two have mentors, Natalie, Lynn?
I did, but I think it's really important when we talk about how to get a mentor.
Yeah.
I've had different experiences. When I was working at a big corporation, there were lots of mentoring programs, and I worked on both sides of those, where I would mentor young people, and then I would also be mentored by senior leadership, which I think is fantastic. But I do think that what you were talking about is kind of the exchange. And I want to really bring that up because I think perhaps a mistake that people that are looking for mentors make is, I've spoken to a class of, let's say, 200 people, students at a university, and I'll get, 5 or 6 emails after saying, I loved what you were saying. It really resonated, which I very much appreciate it. Will you be my mentor?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Natalie, you've had these emails. I'm so appreciative of the people that have come before me, and I always try to give back with anything that I can. It's about the exchange, and I would say the better way to approach that would be I really enjoyed your speech. It really resonated with me. I have a few hours on the weekends and I'd love to help with marketing the no. You know what I mean? Or
Oh,
something like that.
interesting.
And that doesn't
Okay.
mean I'm going to
Exploit them.
necessarily
Yes.
no, exactly. It's them showing that it's a two-way relationship.
That is really interesting.
It's about showing that you're open for a two-way relationship
that you're bringing something.
rather than will you be my mentor?
Yeah, so Natalie's nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 things that I don't do. I don't mentor anymore, and I don't do LinkedIn recommendations.
Okay, why don't you mentor?
Lots of people that say, will you mentor me? And I say, I won't mentor you, but is there something specific that you want or need? And if it's an introduction, if it's me to look at your CV, I've got 5 minutes, I've got 10 minutes on this day, I will do it and I will give you feedback. If you're doing a grant application, ping it over to me, I will give you feedback.
So it's
I've got my fingers
specific.
very task specific.
Moving on to job applications, you mentioned LinkedIn, Natalie. According to them, women apply for 20% fewer jobs than men, despite similar job search behaviours. So they're all searching in the same way, but the men apply for 20% more jobs. Why do we think that is?
So I know the research says it's because we look at a job profile and say, well, we can't do 100%, so we're not going to apply. But I think we're looking more objectively at organisations and saying, do I think I will thrive in this organisation?
Do you think so? I mean, that's a very positive take on that.
I'm speaking to my team, will I be happy? And it's a broader lens, and the pool of organisations where you believe you're going to be happy is a lot smaller than the pool of organisations that are offering roles. So I think there is that. I think there is do I fit all of the criteria, therefore I won't apply? And I absolutely say if you think that, just stop and just apply. I mean, if I can do one thing on a job description, or to be honest, if I can't do any of it, but I just want to apply, I'll apply.
Well, yeah, because there's good data on that with men. That they, if they meet 60% of the qualifications, they'll apply. Yeah. And women won't. They want a much higher bar.
I actually totally agree with what you've said, because it's what my experience was. After my first experience of the workplace, I was very focused on finding somewhere I could be happy in the long term and thrive.
I've seen it personally. I've got a lot of friends that are hiring, and when we put out a job application, and we're a small startup, we don't have recruiters, we get hundreds and hundreds of qualified applications. And when I talk to colleagues, they're like, we can't get 20 good applications. I think it shows that people think they can be happy in my organization. We're mission driven, we're female founded, there's all of these outward signals that I embody the values that you might have. And I'm so thankful for that, because
clear purpose.
There's purpose. Again, it's just a qualitative story of my own, but it's something I hadn't thought of, Natalie, and I see it every day in my own organization.
Okay, I'm gonna move us on to job interviews. Actually, in the room, I'm thinking about what candidates should be aware of right off the bat when they're talking about salary and benefits with potential employers. What should be in their mind at that moment?
What is your previous or current salary? Do not answer that question. Anyone that is still asking that question, stop.
But how do you say no without sounding confrontational in an interview for a job you want?
And if you are asked that question, I would just say what my current salary is irrelevant to the value that I'd bring to your organisation on day one of joining.
Yeah.
Because it is irrelevant.
I suppose I'm also thinking about things like, legally speaking, obviously your employers, they can't ask about that. They can't ask about your age, your status, pregnancy intentions, any of these things. In your experience, are you still finding that indirectly quite a lot of employers are still trying to ascertain things like that when they're interviewing women?
Inadvertently, people sort of say, so tell me more about yourself. What do you do outside of work? And ultimately, do you have children?
Yeah.
Do you have a partner? Do you have things that mean you won't have time to do this thing? That's what they're asking.
How do you counter that?
Again, it goes back to, before you did the application, what sort of organisation did you think you were joining? If in that moment that question is asked and you believe that you need to hide it because it's going to be a penalty, that is not a job that you should want to have. And that's what I'm also saying. We need to take responsibility for what our careers look like, because if you know it's going to be bad at that point, it's never going to get better.
It's a red flag. I totally
Absolutely
agree.
a red flag.
It's a bit like dating, If someone asks you on a date a very awkward question like, will you continue working if we have children? Then I know I would be like, bye.
Discussing potential children
There are
on
like
the first date
12
sounds
red
quite
flags
alright.
but I probably am guilty sometimes of asking questions because I do want to get to know the person. I have a small team. It really is, about who are you and what's important to you. But I would hope that the gut of someone, that's interviewing with me is like, yeah, I'm a mom. I talk about my 2-year-old in an interview and I say, yeah, he's right here. And if he makes some noise, apologies. And so I think probably from that, you can understand where I'm coming from. But if you feel going into something that this will be used against you, you probably, answer it in a very neutral way and you probably don't accept that job.
As your career progresses, and obviously you're thinking, you're going to be you're building up skills, you're building up experience, you're looking for more pay. We know that men are better. Data tells us the men are much better at asking for it and they're much better at getting it. Nearly 1 in every 3 men who ask for more pay get it. For women, it's 1 in 5. It speaks to confidence. What else does it speak to here?
There are organisations that just perceive we are adding less value. So what can we do about that? Talk up the things that you're doing. Don't do the work and then hope that someone knows that you delivered X or Y, that delivered additional value for the business. Find opportunities to talk about the work that you've done. Even if you have to create the opportunity, you have to create a lunch and learn to say, there was no strategy for this thing. This is the way that I did it. Or take the organisation on a journey of having a conversation about something that they've never spoken about before. It might be AI, it might be digital marketing, whatever it is. Show up. Because men show up in the social spaces. Men show up in moments, in meetings where they just add that idea. I used to say to all of the women that I worked with and that worked for me, never go into a meeting and not contribute. You are not here to take notes. And at the point when someone says, who's taking notes, put your pen down.
It is definitely not you. Absolutely, I entirely agree with that. We're saying it's bias on the part, or potentially bias on the part of employers. But there is also good data that says when men move job, they're just better at asking for more. So they're better at asking. It's not necessarily all about employers saying no. So it's that, isn't it? It's actually having the self-confidence. Why don't women have it now? You would kind of imagine, wouldn't you, that now we would. But apparently we don't.
Well, we only got the vote 100 years ago. Like, that isn't actually that long. I think things have gotten better for us. I believe it is harder to navigate the world as a woman, and that can, over time, have an impact on your self-confidence. And I think there are things organisations can do to counter this. For example, I've heard of one organisation that has a no negotiation culture. They just always increase salaries in line with market pay, and that takes the onus off of women to have another thing to fight for and kind of puts the onus more on the organisation, and it has benefits for the organisation.
Same. So at Baloo, that's what we do.
See, this is great. And it's great that you do that, but we know most employers don't do this. So in terms of the onus being on working women to change this outcome, benchmarking, we talked about benchmarking earlier, benchmarking your own worth. How do you do it? As you say, you mentioned, Priyal, there's a tool for this. I mean, you obviously do this, Natalie. You do it yourself? How do you do it?
It's hard to say, have more confidence. I think that's like a really hard thing to say. But I think something that helps me is preparation. That's just something personally that helps me. So when I think about preparation, it's about doing my research. So that's about benchmarking and things like that.
So you know what the job should pay. You know what you're worth.
Absolutely. So it's about using online tools as well as your social, your friends. And then I think it's rehearsing that conversation with people that you trust, rehearsing, actually saying it out loud. I think sometimes saying it out loud is hard to do. I'll speak just from my own experience. And then I think it's about also, there are tips and tricks. I think, this isn't women specific, but I've been asked for a raise before in a big corporate job, and it was, my rent was raised, so I need a raise.
Okay.
And
your response to that was?
I don't know how to tell HR that you need a raise because your landlord, that's not what, it's not about
it's
you.
It's not about your performance.
It's about the company. It's about framing what you can add to the organization. Hopefully your organization has key performance indicators, but goals. So what are your 3-month goals? What are your 6-month goals? What are your 12-month goals? And then you can go in and say, I've met all my 3-month goals, as well as done these 5 extra things. It's about showing the value you've brought, And if your company does not have those more formalized systems, create your own 3, 6, 12-month goals. Bring them to your manager. Say, this is what I would like to accomplish. Is this in line with your expectations? And if they say yes, I can't wait to go back in 6 months and show you I've smashed all of my goals. I've done these extra things, and
So
I
let's talk
deserve
about
a
the money.
raise.
I would add to that, if you've been at the same organization for a long time, make sure you have clarity about what your job role is, and that is, you and your manager are on the same page as that, because what can end up happening is you absorb tasks from here and there and there, and then your role becomes harder to benchmark.
What should you do if you're in the room? Let's talk about asking for a rise. You go in, you think you've done all the things you've talked about, and they say, actually, no, not at this time, budgets are tight. What's your response to that? What do you say?
So there's one other thing that you need to know before you have this conversation. Where is the business in the financial planning year?
Because so when is the best time to ask? This is a good question.
You have to know that.
So tell me, when should you ask?
Go onto Company's House and look at the company account. So you can put the name of your company in, and you can look up the company accounts and the filing date. And so it will either be January to December, or generally April to March.
And this matters why?
Because budgets are planned in these cycles. So if you go at the wrong time and you get the answer that we can't accommodate it in the budget, it's because the budget's been set already.
And it's a very valid reason for as a founder. It is a very valid reason. You have set your budgets. There is no room. So
this is a really valuable tip.
Very valuable. Keep going.
And so the budget conversation might start 3 months before that, or 6 months, whatever it is.
I'm going to play devil's advocate and be awkward and say, okay, I'm working for a micro business. There's literally 3 of us there. So that sort of data isn't available to me. What do I say?
So if it's a not right now and and it's where you want to be, then I would say, okay, over a period of time, I would like to get to this salary. So what are the things that we can work on? Goals, activities, what value can be added?
Other responsibilities, whatever it might be.
Absolutely. So that when we revisit this conversation in 6 months or 12 months, I have a clear understanding of whether or not I'm in line for this sort of raise. And if it comes back that we just simply can't afford it, which also is valid if you're a startup.
Yeah.
There's only so much money in the pot. You have to make a decision for you as to whether or not that is something you're willing to accept, because there are other things that add value, not just money.
Exactly. It might work for you in one way or another, whatever.
Exactly.
There's so many scenarios here. We don't all have our ideal jobs, do we? I am a great fan, I don't know if you are, of documenting those conversations, because it's so easy, particularly in a small business. Not everyone is working for multinationals or even SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises. This stuff is not always written down by HR. So if you have a conversation like that with your boss, I mean, what I've done in the past is sent a kind of an email after saying, this is what we talked about, and this is what you said. And this good idea? You think so?
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, because then there's no debate
just
6 months down the line.
And also, look, as a founder, I may have forgotten that conversation. That's just
Just
there's a lot
normal
going
life.
on.
Life is busy.
So
time is tight. I'm going to move us on to later life careers, because obviously that's a whole array of other responsibilities and challenges too. Priyal, I think the estimate is 2 in 3 of us, this is men and women, will have to take time out from work to care for someone at some point in our working lives. And it is interesting that it's men and women, because we tend to think as women as being carers, but presumably that must play into a carer's gap in terms of both pay and pension.
Yes, in fact, we did some research at PensionBee about the carer's pension gap.
And Lynn, I think you covered it, didn't you?
we did. We covered it at the No. The report found that for every year someone takes out for unpaid caring duties, it's equivalent to about £5,000 less in their pension pot. And you can imagine how that adds up
How it rolls.
over years, and the root cause of that they found was caring for children. So again, not only is there a gender pay gap, there's that care pension gap that kind of compounds into later life.
As employers, have you experienced this in the sense of women coming to you and you kind of get the sense they're under asking because they're so anxious about, they know they've got other stuff they need to be doing?
Yes, and I understand it because I've been there. I understand deeply why women will go, why they'll say, you know what, I've got a job, a good enough job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Good
you
enough.
just start saying these things to yourself. I've got a good enough job. I get enough pay, and I just need that flexibility, because you start thinking about all of the things that could happen as a mother. Well, what if the nursery calls, and you just start, I mean, it's ingrained in us. And I really think the onus of this should be on the companies, and we need to do everything we can to raise awareness about this, both as entrepreneurs, as employees, within the government, because the onus should be on the businesses to create transparency, flexibility. Show me a company that wants to hire women and wants to, employ women. It's a company that offers flexibility without having to ask for it.
Without a pay penalty.
Without a pay penalty.
That's
And
the
if
key
you
thing,
really,
isn't it?
guys, if you really want to retain women, this is what you need to do. And I think, to me, it's so simple.
Yeah, because it's interesting. You talk, I mean, obviously, working life is changing. And one of the ways in which it's changing is working life's getting longer. And then they run into a whole other challenge again, which is about being undervalued by their employers because they're perceived as approaching the point when they won't be working for much longer, and their companies don't want to invest in them, they don't want to train them, they don't want to promote them. Strategies for that, please. I think we'll close it up with that. What should those women do?
Eleanor Mills has a brilliant network called Queen Ages, and I'm seeing more and more networks like this that are speaking to women in their 50s that possibly had one sort of career trajectory in a very specific industry for a very long time. And what I'm seeing is these women are learning the art of the hustle and the portfolio career. Part of that might be freelancing, part of it might be advising, part of it might be coaching, it might be craft, it could be all of these different things.
You leverage your experience.
You leverage your experience. And the thing that I would say that women should be looking at is board roles. So how can you bring your experience to bear without necessarily needing to work as an executive in an organization, but also then be paid? And if you have a wealth of experience, there are loads of organizations that would snap up the opportunity to have that around their boardroom table, because you can have a couple of board roles well into your 70s or 80s if you want to.
Which is a lovely idea. But thinking about the majority of women who are not in that career band, who are doing other sorts of more mainstream work, what should they be saying to their bosses, their employers about, please don't stop training me? How do they demonstrate their value?
That really hurts my heart that someone would have to say, please don't stop training me in an organisation.
It happens.
So firstly, a training budget should be there for everyone to access. And if you have gone to, if it's a larger organisation, HR, and said, I want to go on this training, or I'd like a coach, or whatever it is, and you've been told no, and you believe that it's because of your age, then that is clear age discrimination.
Yep. You are legally protected against it.
You are protected. That should not happen at all. If you're in an organisation and you are being sidelined from projects, again, because of your age, you need to call it out. It is another form of discrimination. And this is genderless. But if you're in an organisation and it's not discrimination, but you're not being seen, which I think is a lot of the conversation that Eleanor Mills is talking about, it's exactly the same advice that we go back to in the beginning. Make yourself seen. Talk about the things that you have done that add value.
And that you can bring.
That
things
you can
add to your role, maybe.
Mentoring, exactly. Mentoring, being a coach,
or training in any form.
Being a coach within the business to support new talent coming through, helping set up systems and processes. But my biggest bit of advice would be to build out your portfolio career.
And to audit what you've got to offer.
Absolutely.
Late stage. If you want to carry on working, you have to carry on working for whatever reason. That's a thing that people don't do. But actually, you should at that point be sitting down and saying, what can I bring here? And telling your line manager what you can bring. Redesigning your job role.
It's, being a hand raiser, consistently showing, when a new project comes up, you're saying, oh, this is going to be so interesting because in 2 years I can see us doing this. It's signaling in ways, I'm here, I'm going to be here. And I think that then there is like some sort of subconscious thing of like, oh, 2 years, huh? You know what I mean?
Yes.
5 years. And so you speak about the future in a we sense, consistently talk about how you're going to continually, and be seen. I like that. I mean, I think that's a really nice way of putting it.
And demonstrate you want to be part of it.
And demonstrate that you want to be part of it. Exactly.
Oh, I really like that. I'd not considered that before, but like this idea of like planting those seeds.
I love that discussion. It's so interesting. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to have you with us. Lots to think about. And talking of longer working lives, we'll be back next month talking about saving for 100-year life. If you're finding the podcast useful, please do leave us a rating and write us a quick review on your app. You know we always love to hear your thoughts. And finally, before we go, just please do remember anything discussed on the podcast shouldn't be regarded as financial advice or legal advice. And when investing, your capital is at risk. Thank you for listening.